Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Thursday, August 21st, 2025. This is USA Today's The Excerpt. Today, Texas Republicans approve a Trump-backed congressional map, plus how the Justice Department wants the Supreme Court to make clear that drug users should not be allowed firearms. And a judge blocks a Texas law requiring the Ten Commandments in public schools. Texas Republicans yesterday passed a new state congressional map intended to flip 5 Democratic-held U.S. House seats up for grabs in the 2026 elections. The move came after dozens of Democratic lawmakers ended a 2-week walkout, temporarily delaying the bill's passage. The 88-52 vote saw Republican legislators, which have dominated Texas politics for more than 2 decades, undertake a rare mid-decade redistricting to help improve their party's odds of holding a narrow House majority. The map, expected to be in sync with the state Senate's version and then eventually signed by Republican Governor Greg Abbott before becoming official, has sparked a national redistricting battle. Democratic California Governor Gavin Newsom is working on a strategy to redraw his state's map to convert 5 Republican seats. The Justice Department wants the Supreme Court to make clear that regular pot smokers and other drug users cannot own guns. I spoke with USA Today Supreme Court correspondent Maureen Groppe for more. Thanks for joining me, Maureen.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So just starting here, what exactly is the government appealing to the Supreme Court as it pertains to drug use and guns?
So the Justice Department wants the court to make clear that people who smoke pot or use other illegal drugs on a regular basis shouldn't be allowed to own a gun. Specifically, they're appealing rulings from lower courts that said a federal law that makes it a crime for drug users to have a gun is unconstitutional unless the person is actually high when they have the gun. In other words, past drug use is not enough to disqualify someone from having a weapon.
Well, tell us a bit more about this one case in particular they want to focus on involving, a dual citizen of the U.S. and Pakistan.
Right. So they're appealing several cases involving people who were charged with having a gun illegally because they're regular pot smokers. And the one they're focusing on is the one that they think is their best argument. And as you said, it involves a dual citizen of the U.S. and Pakistan who was under FBI surveillance. And when the FBI searched his home, they found a pistol and marijuana. His lawyers say there's no crime because he wasn't high when the FBI found the gun, and the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals agreed with them.
And how has Trump's Justice Department sided with gun owners in other cases, Maureen?
So these appeals stand out because the Trump administration has been pretty aggressive about defending the rights of gun owners in other cases. For example, they want the Supreme Court to strike down Hawaii's law, which is similar to laws in several other states that prohibit bringing a handgun onto someone else's property without that property owner's express consent. And when that Fifth Circuit appeals court that I mentioned earlier said that a different federal law, one that sets 21 as the minimum age to own a handgun, when the lower court said that that was unconstitutional, the Justice Department declined to appeal that decision to the Supreme Court.
And what role does this landmark Supreme Court decision from back in 2022 play in all this?
It plays a very big role. In that case, the court said that gun regulations have to be similar to historical rules on weapons in order not to violate the Second Amendment. So implying that rule, in this case, the appeals court said the law doesn't clear that hurdle because there are only examples from history of bans against drunk people carrying a weapon, not when they're sober. The Justice Department, however, they say that laws that existed at the time the country was founded did restrict the rights of habitual drinkers, and they said legislatures have long prohibited the possession of arms by drug users and addicts.
Well, Maureen, what does the Justice Department really want practically on this issue?
So they want the Supreme Court to leave the federal law alone. And they say if there are any concerns that this law might be sweeping too broadly and there are some marginal situations, then those people can individually petition the federal government to get their rights restored, the gun rights restored. And that's a process that the Trump administration has restarted. It was something that theoretically existed but was not funded. And now they have been touting that there are ways for people who've been barred from having guns to make a case to the Justice Department for why they should be allowed to have guns again.
And just in terms of where this goes next, where it might go next, Maureen, what are you hearing from legal experts?
So I spoke with an expert at the Duke Center for Firearms Law, which is a research center, and that expert said that there's a relatively strong chance that the Supreme Court will take this up. And that's because the justices tend to get involved when a lower court strikes down or restricts the application of a federal criminal law, which is what happened here. And they're especially likely to do so if the government asks them to intervene. On the other hand, the justices may also want to wait to weigh in until they see how other appeals courts are handling this issue, because this historical test that the Supreme Court created it not that long ago. And so these lower courts are still trying to figure out how to apply the historical analogy to various situations. And the court may want to wait to see how this plays out in a variety of cases before they decide to get involved.
All right, we have a link to Maureen's full story in today's show notes. Maureen Grappi covers the Supreme Court for USA Today. Thanks, Maureen.
Thank you.
A federal judge has temporarily blocked several Texas school districts from enforcing a law requiring public schools to display the Ten Commandments in every classroom. I spoke with USA Today First Amendment reporting fellow Brianna Frank to learn more. Brianna, thank you so much for joining me on this.
Thanks for having me.
So how did we get to this point, and who are the major players here?
So, this revolves around a Texas law that the legislature passed and Governor Greg Abbott signed into law in June that requires public schools to display the Ten Commandments in each of their classrooms. And more than a dozen families, both religious and non religious, sued and said the law violates the First Amendment. They're being represented by groups including the ACLU, Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, and the Freedom from Religion Foundation. They sued numerous school districts, including Austin Independent School District and Houston Independent School District. And the Texas Attorney General's office is representing the school districts in this case.
All right, so fast forward to yesterday, Wednesday. What did the judge decide here, and how did he explain his decision?
The judge in this case granted a preliminary injunction, which means the districts involved in this lawsuit can't enforce this law once it goes into effect on September 1st. And it'll remain that way until a judge rules on the merits of the case, which will come at a later date. And the judge in this case, Fred Berry, said that the law would violate both parents' rights to guide their children's religious upbringing. And he said it was also likely to, quote, send an exclusionary and spiritually burdensome message to children whose traditions don't line up with the Ten Commandments.
Interesting. And Brianna, did we hear any reaction from the plaintiffs on this?
Yes, the plaintiffs have welcomed this decision. One of the parents, Rabbi Mara Nathan, celebrated the decision and released a statement saying, quote, children's religious beliefs should be instilled by parents and faith communities, not politicians and public schools. And some of the organizations involved in this lawsuit that I mentioned earlier issued similar statements supporting the decision and saying it affirms the separation of church and state.
Well, it's not just Texas where we've seen this play out, right, Brianna? What have we seen in other states on this issue?
That's right. It's been an issue now in several states. Just a few weeks ago, a federal judge blocked several school districts in Arkansas from implementing a similar law that he called, quote, plainly unconstitutional. And a few weeks before that, the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals also struck down a similar law in Louisiana.
Do we expect any appeals or anything else to come out of this?
Yes, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton said in a statement that was emailed to me that he will, quote, absolutely be appealing this flawed decision. So we'll certainly be looking out for that additional layer to this legal fight in the days ahead.
All right, Brianna Frank is USA Today's First Amendment reporting fellow. Thank you, Brianna.
Thanks so much for having me.
The Trump administration is painting the U.S.-Mexico border fence black to make the steel so hot migrants won't climb it. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem unveiled the plans earlier this week at a news conference in Santa Teresa, New Mexico, while workers ran paint rollers up the steel fence behind her. As USA Today has previously reported, hundreds of miles of 30-foot barrier at the border already pose a deadly threat to migrants who attempt to scale the fence. Still, thousands of migrants have tried since President Donald Trump ordered construction of the 30-foot barrier during his first term. During a historic period of migration following the COVID pandemic in 2022, the county hospital in El Paso, Texas, treated 326 people for injuries, or nearly one per day, and some of the injuries were catastrophic. 9 people died that year after falling from the fence, which is roughly the height of a 3-story building. Later today on the Excerpt, America's hidden water crisis. Parts of the U.S. are drying out, and scientists warn the aquifers that keep the Southwest alive are disappearing far faster than they can be replenished.
The overexploitation of groundwater is by far the biggest problem in the southwestern part of the United States. A lot of that groundwater is not coming back. It took hundreds of thousands of years to fill up those aquifers time, and we're burning through it in a century.
Jay Famulietti, a global futures professor at Arizona State University, has extensively studied the nation's water supplies. He joins my colleague Dana Taylor to explain why groundwater depletion threatens food, water, and the future of the region. That's today, beginning at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on this feed. And thanks for listening to the Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio, and you can email us, as always, at podcasts@usatoday.com. I'm Taylor Wilson. I'll be back tomorrow with more of the Excerpt from USA Today.